Okay, ready for part 2 of lesson 5.04 Seeking Perfection. Let's go back to our textbook. And we left off right here at Fourier's Flanx's Brook Farm. Shortly after the collapse of New Harmony, hundreds of people in the United States joined utopian communities based on the writings of the French utopian socialist thinker Charles Fourier. Fourier believed that society could be perfected if organized into communities called phalanxes. In his theory of social organization, he wrote that each phalanx would be self-sufficient in both the agricultural and industrial spheres. In these communities, people would find personal fulfillment by doing work they enjoyed. What about the unavoidable, unpleasant work, hybrid repair, cleaning the stables, feeding and slaughtering the animals, maintaining the buildings, and so forth? These tasks, said Fourier, would be assigned to a juvenile legion, made up of youngsters aged 9 to 16, composed of one-third girls, two-thirds boys. Young people, said Fourier, would enjoy such work because the young love to wade in the mire and play in the dirt, are self-willed, rude, daring, and fond of gross language. I love that description. 28 phalanxes were set up in the United States between 1841 and 1858. One of the best known was Brook Farm in Massachusetts. Elizabeth Peabody, teacher, educational reformer, and social activist, described the community as a few individuals who, unknown to each other, are under different disciplines of life, reacting from different social evils, came together to be wholly true to their natures as men and women. Some of the most prominent American writers and thinkers of the day lived at least for a while at Brook Farm, including Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, who are profiled in the following chapter, and you will more than likely read about them at some point in time in a literature class. The novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne lived at Brook Farm for about 6 months, but left when he found out he could not get his writing done. Some of Hawthorne's experiences at Brook Farm found their way into this 1852 novel, The Blithedale Romance. Despite its lofty goals, Brook Farm soon ran into financial trouble. The farm was sold at auction in 1849. Another American experiment based on Fourier's ideas showed how difficult it was for those ideas to take hold in the American environment. Started in 1843, the North American Phalanx in New Jersey consisted of 90 residents who said they enjoyed plain living and high thinking on their farm. Governing Council carefully screened potential members and allowed only very few to join. Once accepted, new members faced a probationary year during which they were scrutinized by existing members. Few people made the grade, and among those who did, some decided to leave over various disagreements. When a fire destroyed the community's grist mill in 1854, the residents voted not to replace it, even though they could afford to do so, and so ended the North American Phalanx. The Shakers and the Oneida Perfectionists. Before we go on, Oneida. Has anybody ever heard of Oneida before? I don't know if many of you go to buy silverware, but Oneida is a pretty popular brand of silverware, which we'll read about, I think, if we keep going here. Two other utopian experiments, religiously inspired and based on the ideas of unorthodox founders, were briefly successful. The Shakers, as they were called, followed the teachings of a woman named Mother Ann Lee. Their name came from reference to them shaking Quakers, because of the dances they performed to shake sin from their bodies. As a young cotton mill worker in England, Mother Ann experienced what she called religious impressions that revealed to her the sinfulness and depravity of human nature. In 1774, another revelation directed Mother Ann to travel America, where she settled in New York State and announced herself as a messenger of the imminent second coming. She attracted many followers. She taught that God was both male and female in nature, with Jesus representing the masculine side and Mother Ann herself representing the feminine. Even after Mother Ann's death, Shaker communities continued to grow and thrive in the 1850s. Men and women lived separately in villages where they devoted themselves to simple lives filled with hard work and self-denial. The Shakers' goal of Christian perfection included a commitment to celibacy, which practically guaranteed their communities would eventually die out, since they produced no children to carry on their traditions. But in their workshops, they produced many goods that brought them considerable income. The Shakers are perhaps best known for their distinctive style of wooden furniture that achieved beauty through its sheer simplicity. And a side note, I still remember to this day a song that I learned in elementary school music class that came from the Shaker religion. And it goes something like this. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where they ought to be. And when they find themselves in the place so right, they will be in the valley of love and delight. Yes, I'm a great singer. Next paragraph. A very different religious utopian community was founded by John Noyes in 1848 to Oneida, New York, in the burned over district. As a youth, Noyes had shown little interest in religion. Pressured by his devout mother, he attended one of Charles Finney's revivals. He felt no immediate change of heart, but fell severely ill shortly afterward. Once recovered, he pursued religious studies, eventually attending the Yale Divinity School. There he developed an unusual interpretation of Christian salvation, which he called perfectionism. Noyes taught his followers that a person once saved became perfect and incapable of sin. The Oneida Perfectionists, as Noyes' group was called, generated income through manufacturing. They made, among other things, steel traps, silk thread, and silverware. The perfectionists shared everything. Even pocket watches were owned by the community rather than by men who carried them. What most disturbed outsiders was the perfectionists shared their spouses. The perfectionists believed in complex marriage, which in essence meant every man was considered married to every woman in the community. Legal authorities frowned upon these complex marriages and threatened to arrest Noyes. Rather than face charges, Noyes fled to Canada in 1879. 2 years later, the Oneida religious community disbanded and became a joint stock company. It still manufactures silverware today. So, next time you're in a store and you're looking at silverware, I don't know how many 15 and 16-year-olds go look for silverware, but remember that. The Oneida Perfectionist Community. Reform in the cities. In the early 19th century, though more than 90% of Americans still lived on farms or in small towns, cities were growing at least twice as fast as the rest of the country. New York City's population in 1830 was 6 times larger than 40 years before. After visiting the United States in 1832, Alex de Tocqueville wrote, "I looked upon the size of certain American cities, and especially in the nature of their population, as a real danger. This population included many immigrants living in poverty. In Boston alone, 3,500 people were sentenced to debtors' prisons in 1820 because they could not pay their bills. Poverty bred social ills. Many city dwellers crowded into filthy and unsafe tenements." Here's a picture of a drawing of a squalid tenement. Raw sewage ran on the streets. Epidemics of cholera, yellow fever, and tuberculosis ran through the slums. Those who survived often earned so little they struggled to feed their families. If injury or illness befell them, they could expect little help from their employers or the government unless they wanted to live in a jail or an asylum. Given such misery, it is little wonder that drunkenness, gambling, and crime were widespread in American cities. Middle-class Christian evangelists set up urban missions hoping to both spread the gospel and to cure poverty and vice. In 1817, several evangelists founded the Society for the Prevention of Pauperism in the city of New York. Within 8 years, the city had more than 100 relief organizations. Pious middle-class Christian women hired immigrants to work in their kitchens and nurseries at home so they could volunteer to help out the relief organizations. These women carried the message to the poor and downtrodden that their problems could be solved by a religious, industrious and thrifty way of life. The ladies were eager to help those they called the deserving poor, but they had little patience for people they considered idlers or sinners. When the Panic of 1837 hit, middle-class families faced financial problems of their own. Many women had to give up their charity work. The dedicated reformers who would remain turned their attention to the root causes of poverty, including unemployment, lack of education, and the abuse of alcohol. The temperance movement. The early 1800s, Americans drank more alcoholic beverages than they do today. By one estimate, nearly 3 times as much. They generally considered alcohol a healthy and necessary part of life. Former President John Adams, who had once rallied against drunkenness in taverns, started each day with a mug of hard cider at breakfast. Many American men routinely drank a glass of whiskey before breakfast and took whiskey or rum breaks rather than coffee or tea breaks during the day. They consumed more alcohol during and after dinner as an aid to digestion and sleep. Many women and even children also drank. In cities, more people drank alcoholic beverages, partly because of the shortage of pure water. And immigrants from Ireland and Germany who settled in American cities brought from the old country a tradition of socializing in pubs or beer gardens where drinking was an accepted part of fellowship. But when liquor flowed too freely, it led to problems. There we go. Public drunkenness, thievery, brutality, and poverty in families in which the breadwinner was too drunk to work. Some reformers urged a temperate or moderate consumption of alcohol. These first reformers, who organized intemperance societies, generally did not push for a complete ban on alcohol. For example, Lyman Beecher, a young Connecticut clergyman, began his temperance career with such modest proposals as asking church leaders to refrain from serving liquor at their meetings, but Beecher soon moved to call for a complete ban on demon rum. One day in 1825, Beecher called on a prominent parishioner and found himself drunk in bed. Appalled, he went home and wrote 6 sermons on the nature, occasion, signs, evils, and remedy of intemperance, in which he described the physical and moral hazards of consuming any alcohol. Beecher delivered these sermons from his church pulpit on 6 successive Sundays and then offered them for publication around the country. Okay, and I'm just going to skip that paragraph. Many Americans, especially women whose husbands struggle with alcohol addiction, embraced Beecher's cause. They supported his call for the formation of a national organization that would work for the banishment of ardent spirits from the list of lawful articles of commerce. The American Society for the Promotion of Temperance, also known as the American Temperance Society, was formed in 1826. Beecher and his followers demanded a complete ban on the sale of alcohol in the United States. Within 8 years, the organization was supplying information to 5,000 state and local temperance societies, and more than 1 million Americans had taken some sort of pledge to avoid alcohol. Temperance supporters argued over the wording of that pledge. Should it require abstinence from all alcohol, including beer or wine? Or was it enough to swear off distilled spirits such as rum and whiskey? Some local temperance societies settled the argument by offering members a choice of 2 pledges. They could promise not to drink distilled spirits, or they could promise not to drink any alcohol whatsoever. Those who signed the latter pledge were listed on the society's rolls with the letter T, signifying total abstinence next to their names. These people became known as teetotalers. The term teetotaler is still used today to describe one who abstains from all forms of alcohol. And let me just see how many pages we have left here. Because I think I'm going to stop and begin this on another video because we're running out of time. Okay, we're going to stop this video and there will be a part 3 because this is a lot of reading in this lesson. So stop and we'll start another one shortly.